Defiance on the streets here in Tehran. Despite fear of a deadly crackdown by Iranian authorities, these protesters are not backing down. This footage, authenticated by the Associated Press, shows protesters marching along a street and chanting, quote, "This country will not be a real homeland until the clerics are laid to rest." The protests, spurred by the sharp decline in Iran's currency and growing economic suffering, have brought many thousands of people onto the streets. And the regime is struggling to contain the unrest. The leaders showed some sympathy initially, acknowledging the genuine anger, but then carried out a brutal crackdown. There are reports that dozens of protesters have been killed. The state-imposed internet blackout continues, making it difficult to assess the full extent of unrest. Iranian regime has accused the protesters of aligning with what they say are foreign enemies. On Friday, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, accused that the protesters were ruining their own streets to make the president of another country happy, referring to the US President Donald Trump. Trump has threatened Iran to not use excessive force on protesters and offered his help again on Saturday. On his Truth Social post, Trump said, "Iran is looking at freedom, perhaps like never before. The USA stands ready to help." Iranians are calling it a genuine grassroots movement that has brought widespread anger to the surface. Protesters are claiming the streets, openly defying the regime.
Well, let's get more on this now with Behnam Taleblu. He is a senior director of the Iran program at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, a non-profit think tank focusing on US national security. It's great to have you with us here on DW. After warning of possible military strikes, President Trump said on Truth Social that Iran is looking at freedom, perhaps like never before. The USA stands ready to help. What options does Washington have to pressure Tehran?
Pleasure to be with you, Hannah. That really is the million-dollar question right now, given the fact that President Trump has significantly reiterated and underscored his threat to hold the regime accountable if protesters are killed. And as the package correctly mentioned, scores have been killed. President Trump here really does have all the cards. It's really his choice: diplomatic, informational, intelligence, military, economic. Something that I have been advocating for would be to, replicate the oil sanctions enforcement model that was done with Venezuela, meaning if the Islamic Republic is greasing the wheels of its security apparatus by continuing to sell oil to China, well, those tankers should also be confiscated. But make no mistake, Iranians, one of the most impactful pictures I've seen in the 14 days of protests now has been Iranians disabling surveillance cameras. I would say on the cyber side, another option for the US would be to disable the command and control, to blind the regime's security forces without needing to have to go kinetic.
Exactly, and let's talk about that because despite the near total internet blackout for days in Iran, it appears that Elon Musk's Starlink system has enabled some crucial footage from inside Iran to reach the outside world. So does the US have other capabilities to actually restore the internet access for Iranians?
Certainly here, as a tech superpower, this is something that is capable. The question is, why hasn't Washington really, since the previous internet blackout in 2019, as well as selective ones we've seen in other protests, including during the Women Life Freedom movement, as well as during parts of the 12-day war with Israel, why hasn't this been something that has been elevated to the U.S. national security toolbox and at the top of the list? Clearly, there's the capability. Clearly, there's the money. Clearly, there's the infrastructure. But it's about putting A plus B plus C, public and private, together in the room to make sure that the U.S. can stand and defend both its strategy and its values in the Middle East. And again, this is not charity. This is not missionary work. Standing with the Iranian people, the most pro-American people in the Middle East, and helping get their story out against a fundamentally anti-American regime that chants death to America, that chants death to Israel, that has threatened the life of President Trump himself. I think helping them connect to the internet and get their voice out is something relatively cheap and something that is relatively capable and something that Washington should be doing.
And if, as you say, all of those different elements do come together, how much would that US involvement actually help protesters in Iran on the streets there? I mean, is the American president viewed as an ally rather than an adversary?
Precisely. You might have one of the most interesting contradictions in Iran today, where you have a fundamentally anti-American government and a fundamentally pro-American society or pro-American street, you could say. And in this case, you've even seen during the middle part of these protests, particularly around day 6, 7, 8, Iranians renaming streets after President Trump. Iranians, calling in social media to try to get President Trump to intervene. Iranians even putting stickers and labels up with President Trump's name and picture on it, trying to get him to act on his aforementioned, previously stated threat to intervene. So certainly they know that the U.S. has this power. Certainly they know that the U.S. in the past has been willing to torpedo the conventional wisdom to stand with them. In fact, it was President Trump himself who, in the first term, in defense of Iranian protesters, has the most liked tweet in Persian Twitter history from January 2020, just 6 years ago.
And let's talk about another main figurehead here. Do you believe the son of the last Shah, Reza Pahlavi, who is living in exile in the US, has popular support in Iran?
Certainly the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, his name has been really the only major opposition name chanted in various cycles of boom and bust protests. But make no mistake, there's been a steady upward trend in Iranian nationalism that correlates with the failure of the Islamic Republic. And what you've seen since 2017 is Iranians increasingly be willing to call his family's name, his grandfather's name, his position, and then ultimately him, such that he really is someone whose name, whose picture, whose identity is part and parcel of this protest movement. I mean, one reason why the Islamic Republic is looking to black out the internet is because just a few days ago, the Crown Prince had called for a massive turnout. And that's what really was a game changer, or the tipping point of these protests, the linking of external opposition with domestic street power. That's something that the Islamic Republic was unexpecting and unprepared for.
Behnam Taleblu, Senior Director of the Iran Program at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for all of your analysis there.
Thank you.
Negin Shiraghaei is the founder of the Azadi network, a grassroots organization that helps marginalized groups in Iran. What are you hearing from your sources in Iran about how extreme this crackdown on protesters has become?
As we heard in your report, since Thursday evening, when the protests intensified, there's a countrywide communication shutdown. So basically what they've done, there's no internet, there's no, for a while there wasn't even connection between the people inside the country. Landline wouldn't work, the mobile connections wouldn't work. Now, through Starlink, some of them that has been sent to Iran throughout the last 3 years, and also some, going around this kind of restrictions, people found ways, and there are trickles of news coming out. And what we see is a really dire situation. I've been talking to different sources in different parts of Iran. The picture I'm getting is the right to shoot and right to kill. Not every bullet that comes out is the war bullet and a live bullet, but there are at least in every 5. There is one that is live bullet, and every 5 soldiers there's one that have the guns and kills people. And the pictures in the hospitals are really devastating, because they show there is head injuries, and people in mass numbers are going to the hospital with serious injuries, and unfortunately a lot of them are dying. We don't have any exact numbers. It's really difficult at this moment, but for example, in the city of Zirab, which is a small town in Mazandaran, northern region of Iran, the number of casualties and dead people are really high. And this has been confirmed by a couple of sources just now that I was talking to. So I think as soon as there is an internet opening and we can hear, the death toll will rise, and we will have a better picture of how many people lost their lives. And don't forget, a lot of these protesters are younger generation. We see every aspect of the society, every generation of the society participating in this protest. But the number of 15, 16 years old on the streets are really high. And they are most probably targeted by the government, and they are the ones who would be amongst the dead.
Well, considering what you call the dire situation, the conflicting numbers, the thousands of arrests, we're being told, and dozens of deaths, and now threats to protesters of execution, how can people voice their concerns when they're up against that?
I think people are fed up. They don't scare at this moment. You have to remember what led to these protests. The economical collapse of the Iranian government is either already happened, some argue already happened, or some say it will happen in the next coming weeks. Because, for example, imagine overnight the price of egg would rise 300%. Who would be able to live their lives, to continue living and have a hope for the future in that situation that they know at least this has been a trend for decades, but in the last 6 months it intensified massively, and a lot of it is due to the mismanagement, massive corruption by Quds forces and the government, and that means people are hungry and they don't have anything to lose, and that's what you hear over and over again from people, and that's why even the crackdown is that massive. You know, a week ago, when I was talking to my sources inside the country, they would say, we support this, but right now we're not feeling confident enough to go. They're going to kill us. The price is so high. And then since Tuesday, that narrative has changed massively. People got to the point thinking, we don't have anything to lose. And we're going to stand in the streets until we create something, some sort of change.
But the leadership is signalling that crackdown could become more extreme. Despite threats from Washington, the US State Department warns, do not play games with President Trump. When he says he'll do something, he means it. What can we expect?
This is a really good question, because this kind of narrative from the Supreme Leader has been always out there. When there's a crisis, he's trying to show a strong face. But from what I'm hearing, it is not necessarily true at this moment in time, because what Trump has done is change the table and the way the game is played. And even since the 12 days war with Israel, we've heard a lot of rumors about back channeling from fractions in the government trying to talk to Trump and finding a way of succession for a Supreme Leader. Because don't forget, the Supreme Leader has been in power for 37 years. Right. And for him, the legacy of Islamic Republic is really important. So is he getting to the point that he can step out or step down or come to some sort of compromise and allow some other fractions from the country to take over for the sake of keeping Islamic Republic in place? That's a really important question. I think he's been facing and asking the people around him. And this is a decision that we would see if the protest, if the pressure from the people continues, and if there is a pressure, actual pressure from Trump. And this is the thing, he's unpredictable. He's not Biden, who would try to do democracy. Overnight, he might do something different. And that created an element of a scare for them and fear. So that decision, I think, is really interesting to wait and watch. I think you mentioned the Pahlavi, people chanting Pahlavi's name and the son of the former monarch in Iran. I think he has a really big challenge. So for years, his name has been out there. He's the only figure out there that people know, general public know, as a sort of opposition to the Iranian government, who might be able to replace whatever is left of Islamic Republic. But the problem for him is he needs the mandates, and I'm going to be quick, and also he needs to get the system in place. He needs to run the country afterwards. And I don't think he's sending enough signal to the world that he can do that.
Okay, interesting insights there from Negin Shiraghaei from the Azadi network. Thank you.